The doorbell rang too faintly to signal danger, but that's exactly what walked into the shop right then. Augustus took 2 steps inside and felt the air turn heavy, almost suffocating. The place was empty, way too quiet for a regular morning. The lights flickered, and the wall clock was frozen at 9:17, like time had given up on the spot. Then he heard it, a muffled, broken sob coming from behind the counter. Not your everyday crying, the kind of sound someone makes when they've already cried themselves empty and have nothing left. He moved closer, slow. The young clerk was kneeling on the floor, hugging her own legs, shoulders shaking. Next to her, a crumpled manila envelope. Augustus froze when he saw what was written on it. His full name, handwritten. None of this added up. Nobody in this neighborhood was supposed to know him, let alone connect him to some forgotten corner of the city. She sensed him and shot up too fast, wiping her face with the sleeve of her uniform. Forced a brittle smile, the kind that cracks easily. Said she'd be right with him. Augustus nodded, pretending everything was normal, but inside something was shifting. He felt that old pressure in his chest, the same one he got before big decisions, or big mistakes. While she straightened shelves, Augustus took it all in. Duct tape on the floor outlining a rectangle way too big. A back door cracked open. A metallic smell hanging in the air. He made small talk, asked about cheap phones, cables, basic stuff. She answered on autopilot, said her name was Lena. Her voice shook every time he threw in an unexpected question. When he asked about the owner, the silence dragged on too long. Lena swallowed hard before saying the guy wouldn't be in that day. She didn't explain why. She didn't need to. Her eyes told Augustus there was a lot more buried in that answer. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. She didn't pick up, just switched it to silent, like someone postponing a death sentence. Outside, a man hurried past the window, staring inside a little too hard. Augustus caught it. Lena did too. The tears threatened to come back. She dropped a box by accident. Receipts scattered across the floor. Augustus crouched to help and saw the name that made his stomach drop. Aurora Foundation, repeated on torn papers, all from the same week. The foundation he kept under the tightest wrap. The one nobody was supposed to link to him. Before he could say anything, the doorbell rang again. But nobody came in. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. Lena scooped up the receipts too fast, hands shaking, and shoved them into the cash drawer. Augustus acted like he hadn't noticed, but every detail burned into his mind. He decided to stay, said he needed to compare prices, asked to see the stock. Lena hesitated, then agreed. Maybe because she was tired of running. Maybe because she sensed she wasn't alone anymore. The stockroom was in the back, behind a narrow door. The air was colder, thicker. The lights took forever to come on. Augustus spotted marks on the wall, like something heavy had been dragged in a hurry. Lena was breathing too fast. When he asked if she was okay, the answer came as a confession. She said this shop wasn't just a shop. Bad stuff had been going on for months. The old owner took weird payments. Always cash, always at night. Men would come in, leave fast, never actually buy anything. She said she started keeping evidence once she realized big names were being used to cover crimes. A chill ran down Augustus's spine when she mentioned fake foundations, diverted donations, money laundering. Every word fit into something he'd been ignoring for far too long. Lena said that morning the owner hadn't shown because he'd tried to walk away from the whole thing. They don't let anybody walk, she whispered. Footsteps echoed outside the shop. Muffled voices. Lena went pale. Said they were back. Said the envelope with Augustus's name was her last shot. She'd figured out who he really was. Figured out the quiet guy in front of her controlled a foundation powerful enough to take these people on. Augustus didn't deny it, didn't confirm, just listened. And in that moment he realized the anonymity he prized had turned into a weapon aimed right at him. The sound of breaking glass came from the front of the shop. The glass shattered sharp, violent, final. Not just noise, an announcement. Lena let out a short scream before she even realized Augustus had already grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the hallway that led back to the sales floor. The crash echoed off the narrow walls, followed by voices. Deep, controlled, the kind that don't need to yell to be obeyed. "It's here," one of them said. Augustus felt the words land like a punch in the gut. Not a guess, a certainty. He shoved Lena behind a metal shelving unit in the stockroom, so fast she nearly stumbled. The space was cramped, smelled like mold and old oil. Boxes stacked to the ceiling threw jagged shadows on the walls. The light flickered once, twice, then settled into a sickly glow. "Don't make a sound," Augustus whispered, so low it was almost a thought. Lena nodded, hands clamped over her mouth. The crying had stopped, replaced by something worse, silent, paralyzing panic. Augustus knew that look. He'd seen it in boardrooms when billions were on the line. Seen it in mirrors when bad calls came due. But never this close. Footsteps got closer. Heavy boots on the sales floor. One of them kicked something. A chair, maybe a box. Another chuckled low, like he already knew how the story ended. "Search it properly," a third voice said. The girl wouldn't have the guts to leave alone. Augustus closed his eyes for a second, calculating. No gun in his hand. No security. Just observation. That's how he'd always survived. Watching before moving. The closest guy stopped just yards from the stockroom door. Augustus could see his shadow stretching across the wall, warped by the weak bulb. Lena's heart was pounding so hard he worried they'd hear it. He gripped her wrist firmly, projecting a calm he didn't fully feel but knew how to fake. Then it happened. "His name's Augustus," the man said from the other side of the door. "Check if he's here." The world shrank. Lena turned her face slowly toward Augustus. Her eyes widened, not just fear, but late realization. It all clicked. The envelope, the foundation, the calm demeanor, the eyes that always seemed to measure more than they showed. She wasn't hiding with some random customer. She was hiding with the man they were looking for. Augustus felt something he hadn't felt in years, the sense that there was nowhere left to run. His carefully built anonymity, decades in the making, had ended right there. And worse, it had put someone else in the crosshairs. The man pushed open the stockroom door. The shelving unit behind them creaked slightly under the weight of the boxes. Augustus held his breath. A flashlight beam sliced through the room, sweeping shelves, climbing walls, dropping slowly. The beam stopped. "Here," the man said. Before he could take another step, a sharp metallic snap echoed from the front of the shop. A secondary alarm going off. Augustus recognized it instantly. He'd hit the emergency button on his watch seconds earlier. The men exchanged glances. "What was that?" one asked. "No idea," another said. "But I don't like it." The hesitation was all Augustus needed. "Now," he whispered to Lena. He shoved the shelving unit hard enough to make noise on the far side of the room, then yanked Lena by the hand toward a narrow passage he'd spotted earlier. A false door hidden behind old boxes, leading to an old hallway in the next building. The men reacted too late. "Hey," one shouted. "Over there." Augustus and Lena ran. The hallway was tighter than it looked. Peeling walls scraped their shoulders. The floor was uneven, littered with old debris. Lena nearly fell twice, but Augustus didn't let go of her hand. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder, mixed with curses and heavy breathing. "Don't stop," Augustus said, voice steady, almost cold. "They're gonna kill us," Lena gasped. "Not if we get out of here." The hallway opened onto a concrete stairwell, barely lit, climbing into an abandoned building. Augustus went first, pulling Lena behind him. Halfway up, a gunshot rang out. The bullet ricocheted off the wall, spraying plaster. Lena screamed. Augustus shoved her down, covering her with his body. Another shot. "Closer. Keep going," he ordered. They reached the top and burst through a rusted door into an empty old office. Broken windows let in the gray morning light. The smell of dust and neglect was thick, but to them it smelled like freedom. Outside, sirens started closing in. Not one, two, a lot. The men froze. Augustus heard the shift in their footsteps. A muffled curse. The unmistakable sound of someone giving up. Minutes later, police stormed the abandoned building from the other side. Shouted commands. Guns drawn. Augustus raised his hands right away, identifying himself. Lena was shaking so hard she could barely stand. When it was over, when the men were cuffed on the shop floor, Augustus felt a deep exhaustion. Not physical, moral. The accumulated weight of past choices charging sky-high interest. In the back of the squad car, Lena finally broke. Cried without holding back. No shame, no words. Augustus stayed quiet, staring out the window. Red and blue lights reflected off the glass, warping the city. He knew that night wasn't the end. He knew that from that moment on, his life, and hers, would never be the same. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he was ready for whatever came next. The smell of cold coffee and old paper filled the precinct room when Lena started talking. It wasn't a standard interrogation room. Smaller, quieter, almost too neutral. Probably on purpose. Augustus quickly realized this wasn't routine. His presence changed everything. Changed the tone, the urgency, the care. Lena held a paper cup with both hands, like it was the only thing anchoring her. Her eyes were still red, but now there was something new in them. Resolve, fear mixed with relief, like someone who finally stops running because there's nowhere left to go. "I'm gonna tell you everything," she said. From the beginning. The detective nodded. The recorder clicked on. A small sound that felt too loud. Lena explained how she'd started working at the shop almost by chance. Simple ad, low pay, no real contract. The owner, Mike, seemed like just a tired guy trying to keep a business afloat. At first, nothing felt off. Customers came in, bought stuff, left. But then the others showed up. Men who didn't ask prices, didn't test devices, just handed over envelopes and disappeared. She said she got suspicious when Mike started insisting certain sales be logged under specific names. Funds, companies, foundations. Too organized for something that felt slapped together. When she asked, he brushed it off. Said it was better not to know. Augustus listened without interrupting. Every piece fit into a puzzle he'd been ignoring way too long. Lena said she started digging on her own once she noticed big amounts showing up in the books with no actual products sold. Fake donations, phantom purchases, clean money in, dirty money out. She began keeping receipts, taking photos, saving messages. All hidden, all alone. "I knew if they found out, I wouldn't make it out alive," she said, voice steady even though she was still shaking. The detective asked about the Aurora Foundation. Lena took a deep breath. The name came up 3 times. Always tied to big transactions. At first I thought it was just another front, until I looked deeper. She said she spent nights trying to figure out who was really behind it. Nothing direct, no names, no public face, but there were patterns, money trails, real projects funded, legit donations mixed with fakes. It didn't feel like just a shell. It felt like something that had been hijacked from the inside. Augustus felt the weight of that. When Mike tried to get out, everything sped up. He'd been jumpy the last few days. Talking about disappearing. About not owing anybody anything anymore. The morning he didn't show, Lena found the clock stopped, the back door open, drag marks on the floor. She knew right away. Mike hadn't left. He'd been erased. The envelope with your name. She hesitated, looking at Augustus. It was the last thing I hadn't handed over yet. I needed someone powerful enough to see it before it was too late. The silence afterward was heavy. Hours later, different room. Different vibe. Lawyers, prosecutors, federal agents. Now Augustus wasn't just a witness. He was the centerpiece. He officially revealed his identity there. No press, no announcement, but irreversible consequences. He explained the foundation, its original purpose, the layers of anonymity built to avoid political pressure or outside influence. How parts of the system had been exploited by corrupt middlemen. How rapid growth had created gaps. Gaps used by people he never met but who acted in his name. "I should have caught it sooner," he said. "I trusted the reports too much. The people too little." The investigation moved fast after that. Warrants issued, accounts frozen, shell companies collapsed one by one. The Aurora Foundation made headlines, not as the villain, but as the trigger. The piece that, once pulled, brought the whole thing down. The press tried for immediate comment. Augustus turned them all down. It wasn't time yet. Lena was placed in witness protection. New name, new address, new life, in exchange for the truth. When she signed the papers, her hands barely shook anymore. She looked exhausted but steady. Before leaving, she asked to speak with Augustus. They met in a quiet hallway at the precinct. No cameras, no speeches. "I wasn't sure you'd believe me," she said. "Or if you'd just ignore me like everybody else." "I almost did," Augustus replied. "And that's what scares me most now." She gave a faint smile. At least somebody walked into that shop that day. When Lena walked away, escorted by agents, Augustus stood alone for a few seconds. He looked at his reflection in the glass. Saw a man older than he remembered. Not from years, but from choices. He knew this wasn't an ending. It was a break. The foundation would never be the same. Neither would he. And somewhere in the city, an empty shop held the echoes of everything that almost stayed buried forever. The cafe was tucked down a narrow side street, away from the main flow of the city. No flashy sign, no outdoor tables. The kind of place that only exists for people who need to vanish for a few minutes. Augustus got there first, picked a table in the back, facing the door, old habit he never shook. The smell of fresh brewed coffee mixed with old wood and distant rain. He stirred his cup slowly, watching the steam rise, when Lena walked in. She looked different, not just the plain clothes or the hair pulled back differently. Something subtler, a guarded relief, like someone who still checks over their shoulder but doesn't run all the time anymore. She spotted him right away and walked over cautiously. "Thanks for coming," she said, sitting down. "I should have come sooner," Augustus replied. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was needed. Lena held her cup with both hands, took a deep breath, and for the first time since they'd met, cried without fear. Not despair. Release. Months of tension spilling out in quiet tears. "I thought I was gonna die in that shop," she admitted, voice low. "Every day I figured that would be my last." Augustus listened without cutting in. He'd learned some confessions only happen when you don't rush them. She talked about sleepless nights, the phone buzzing with unknown numbers, the constant fear of being followed. Said when he walked in that day, she thought he was just another stranger. "Never imagined that moment would change everything. When I found out who you really were," Lena paused. "I figured you'd never set foot in a place like that." Augustus gave a small smile. "That's exactly why I did." She looked at him, curious. He explained that he'd always believed real power only works when it can go unnoticed. That visiting ordinary places kept him grounded, reminded him who he was before everything got too big. That stepping into forgotten shops, empty cafes, nameless streets was the only way to stay connected. "But I failed," he finished. "Because I stopped listening to the people inside them." Lena wiped her tears and nodded slowly. "People don't really listen to clerks," she said. "We become part of the background." The words hung between them. Augustus talked about the foundation then. How it started small, how fast growth brought distance. Reports replacing faces, numbers replacing stories. He admitted he'd been proud of the efficiency for too long, without seeing that efficiency without attention turns into neglect. "I thought anonymity was protection," he said. "But now I see it can also be cowardice." Lena didn't agree or disagree. Just listened. "What's gonna happen to me?" she asked after a while. "You're gonna disappear," Augustus answered. "For real. New name, new place. But not alone. The foundation will make sure you have support. Education, a job, safety. Not as a favor, as responsibility." Her eyes filled again, but now it was different. Gratitude without fear. "I didn't do this expecting anything," she said. "I just didn't want to be another person staying quiet." "And you won't be," he replied. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the cafe windows. The world kept moving, indifferent to the quiet conversation rewriting lives. Before they parted, Lena asked one last question. "You gonna keep walking into ordinary places?" Augustus put on his cap, the same one from the day at the shop, and gave a half smile. More than ever now. They stood, a simple handshake, no over-the-top promises, just a quiet understanding. When Lena left, watched from a distance by protection, Augustus stayed a few more minutes. Watched people come and go from the cafe. Nobody recognized him, and for the first time, that didn't comfort him as much as it used to. He walked out too, blending into the wet crowd, knowing that meeting wasn't closure. It was a turning point. Because some stories don't end when the danger passes. They start when someone decides not to ignore the quiet crying in the background anymore. For weeks, the glass door stayed covered by a yellowed judicial seizure notice. The bell that once announced quiet arrivals never rang again. Inside, everything was sealed, photographed, catalogued. Every box, every receipt, every mark on the floor became evidence. But to anyone rushing by on the sidewalk, it was just another failed business. Nobody imagined what had almost stayed buried there. The building was sold months later, renovated, painted bright colors, a new shop opened, loud music, modern displays. But the wall clock was never found. Augustus followed it all from a distance. He turned down interviews, skipped public events, delegated more than ever. But he didn't vanish. Quite the opposite. He started doing something he'd let slip without realizing, walking. No schedule, dropping into places unannounced, sitting on park benches, listening. The Aurora Foundation went through a deep overhaul. Independent audits, radical transparency, fewer layers, fewer middlemen, more real people, more voices. It wasn't easy. There was pushback, criticism. Some said he was overreacting out of guilt. Maybe he was, but Augustus didn't try to justify it. He knew some changes don't come from logic. They come from shock. Lena, now living under a different name, was in another city. Small but safe apartment, new job, an uncomfortable fresh start. The kind every real new beginning is. They didn't talk often, safer that way, but sometimes Augustus got short messages, no details. "I'm okay. Thank you." Nothing more was needed. On one of those aimless walks, Augustus went back to the old neighborhood. Didn't go into the new shop. Just stood across the street for a few minutes, watching ordinary people come and go. Laughing, complaining about prices, living. He closed his eyes for a moment and could almost hear the muffled sob from that day. He understood then it wasn't coincidence. That meeting wasn't random. It was consequence of choices made and unmade, of prolonged silence, of systems that forget the little people. Augustus started funding smaller projects. Local, invisible to headlines. A support center here, a technical course there, nothing carrying his name. But now, unlike before, he showed up. No warning, no speech, just walked through the door and watched. Sometimes he was met with suspicion. Sometimes indifference, a few times, tears. And he learned not to look away. In the final imagined scene of this story, Augustus walks into some random small shop. Dim lighting, a tired clerk behind the counter. Nothing obviously wrong at first glance. He steps up, asks a simple question. She answers on autopilot, but when she looks down, he notices something. A pause, a held-back sigh. He waits, because now he knows, not every sob is weakness. Sometimes it's a cry for help waiting for someone to stop and listen. And not every ordinary guy who walks through a door is just carrying loose change in his pocket. Some carry decisions big enough to change entire lives.